You have no right to step onto my property without permission. That's what I should have told this hoe Karen when she barged into my lakeside cabin. Instead, I stayed seated, calmly watching her stride through my front door with a set of lockpicks and a clipboard, ready to inspect every corner of my home. She thought she'd caught me off guard or believed she finally had the upper hand after months of pestering me. What she didn't know was that I was right in the middle of a crucial video call, the kind where the person on the other end could end her entire career with a single call. And trust me, this story only gets crazier from here. BD Stories family, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Let me rewind to where it all began. My name's Blake Morrison. 3 years ago, I went through absolute hell dealing with another hoe. We're talking about losing 30 grand in legal fees, being forced to sell my house, and having my life turned inside out, all because a power-drunk board decided my garden gnome didn't fit the neighborhood aesthetic. Yep, a garden gnome. That nightmare taught me a crucial lesson. Next time, I wouldn't let myself be the victim. Next time, I'd be ready. So when I bought this peaceful lake cabin, I did my homework. I studied whole laws like I was preparing for the bar exam, consulted with lawyers, installed an advanced security system, and turned myself into a walking legal fortress. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. And good thing too, because Victoria Henderson was about to storm into my life like a Category 5 hurricane. Victoria, or Vicky, as she preferred, was the hoe president. Picture a woman in her early 50s, forced into early retirement from her sales job thanks to her, let's just say, unique management style. She lost her own home in an hoe battle years earlier, and now she seemed determined to make everyone else as miserable as she was. She saw my tidy, peaceful cabana, everything I'd worked for, and I could practically feel the jealousy radiating off her. At first, the harassment came subtly. The first notice claimed my lawn growth pattern was irregular and suspected I'd used unauthorized fertilizer. Reading that, I thought, what does that even mean? My grass was too green? But I knew better than to take the bait. I kept calm, documented everything, and waited for her next move. 2 weeks later, the second notice arrived. Exterior lighting creates excessive light pollution. Environmental regulation violation. My porch light was apparently disturbing the local wildlife. I had to laugh at that one, but I also quietly adjusted my security cameras to get clearer shots of the front entrance just in case. Then came the third notice. She claimed my dock extended 3.3 meters, exceeding the allowed 3.22 meters. She'd been out there with a ruler, desperate to catch me on anything. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about community rules, it was about her vendetta. My calm, happy life was a reminder of everything she'd lost, and she couldn't stand it. Thanks to my past experience, I didn't react emotionally. Instead, I got strategic. I researched her behavior with other homeowners and discovered she followed the same routine. 4 escalating notices, then a direct confrontation. It was practically a script. So I did something she wouldn't expect. I planned for it. Through my freelance work, I had a contact in state government who needed help with cybersecurity. Perfect timing. I scheduled a video meeting with Attorney General Williams for 9:30 a.m., guessing Vicky would strike early when she thought I'd be out jogging or still asleep. The consultation was real. I was genuinely helping Thema, but the timing was intentional. Sure enough, the fourth and final notice came right on schedule. Emergency inspection tomorrow at 9 a.m. Failure to comply will result in immediate entry for safety assessment. She was ready to break into my home if I didn't comply. Any sane person would see this as trespassing, but Vicky saw it as her right to prove she controlled me. I double-checked my calendar. Meeting at 9:30 a.m. If she arrived around 9:15, just as I expected, it would all play out perfectly. Part of me was nervous, but a bigger part felt a thrill. After years of preparation, it was finally time for justice. Vicky had no idea I'd been meticulously documenting her harassment and setting a legal trap she'd walk right into. Live in front of the state attorney general. She thought she was coming to force my compliance. What she was actually doing was committing multiple felonies on camera, with the highest possible legal witness watching in real time. That night, as I positioned my laptop and checked the camera angles, I couldn't help but grin. Tomorrow, Vicky Henderson would find out the difference between patience and weakness. Tomorrow, She'd see that some people fight back with their minds instead of their tempers, and tomorrow, justice would finally get its moment. What I didn't realize was that Vicky had plans of her own. She wasn't just coming for an inspection, she wanted to end me completely. The question was, whose plan would succeed? Drop a comment if you've ever had a neighbor who thought your property was theirs. While I was setting my trap, Vicky was convinced she was setting hers. Later, through court documents and witness accounts, I'd learn exactly what was going through her head that night. And let me tell you, it was even darker than I imagined. This woman was operating on a whole other level of crazy than I had ever imagined. She wasn't just organizing a routine inspection, she was gearing up for a full-scale attack on my life. In her mind, I had to be hiding something huge, maybe an illegal business, unapproved renovations, or who knows what else. She was convinced that no one could own a cabin that immaculate without breaking a dozen rules somewhere along the way. So, she started preparing for what she called a comprehensive assessment. Translation: she planned to rip through my home, hunting for any violation she could find. The gear she pulled together was almost impressive in how over the top it was. A professional-grade camera for documentation, a measuring tape and level to check code compliance, and something she called an emergency access key, to which, of course, was just a set of lockpicks dressed up with fancy labels. She even put together a 47-point checklist that covered everything from paint color to how tall my garden plants were allowed to be. She had practically turned harassment into a professional craft. But she couldn't pull this off by herself, and that's where Dennis Porter came in. Dennis was the HOA secretary, a retired math teacher in his late 40s. When he first joined the board, he genuinely hoped to be helpful. But by now, Vicky had been twisting him around her finger for months, and she needed him to play the part of her witness. She told him, Blake is ignoring community safety standards. As a former educator, you know how important rules and consequences are. She preyed on his sense of responsibility and desire to do what was right. I actually feel bad for Dennis. He truly believed he was helping protect the community. When Vicky insisted they had the legal authority under an emergency inspection clause, he trusted her. Why wouldn't he? She was the president, she spoke with confidence, and she had piles of documents that looked official enough. What Dennis didn't realize was that later that night, he'd go home and dig through the HOA bylaws himself, searching for this emergency rule. And guess what? It didn't exist. That night, he confided in his wife, admitting that something about the whole plan felt wrong. And bless her heart, she told him exactly what he needed to hear. Then don't do it. Your integrity is worth more than staying on Vicky's good side. But Dennis was afraid. He'd seen firsthand how Vicky treated anyone who dared question her authority, and he didn't want to end up as her next target. Meanwhile, Vicky was polishing her plan like it was a military operation. She decided they'd show up at exactly 9 a.m., betting that I'd be out on my morning run or still asleep. We'll catch him completely off guard, she told Dennis confidently. Dennis, trying to be honest, mentioned he'd often seen my car parked at home around that time. Vicky just brushed it off. Then he's probably still in bed. Even better, we'll catch him in his pajamas, totally unprepared. Her arrogance was staggering. She wasn't just counting on surprise, she planned to use her so-called official authority to corner me into compliance. And she wasn't just hunting for violations, she wanted evidence to paint me as uncooperative and defiant toward the community. In her twisted mind, she believed she was defending everyone from my disruptive independence. But here's where Vicky's overconfidence became her blind spot. She had convinced herself I was just another stubborn homeowner who'd crumble under pressure. She had no idea about my previous war within HOA, the legal groundwork I'd laid, or how methodically I'd prepared for this very scenario. After tomorrow, she told Dennis, Blake Morrison will finally understand who really runs this neighborhood. The morning of the so-called inspection, Dennis almost backed out. I can only imagine what he felt, caught between knowing it was wrong and being terrified of what Vicky might do if he refused. When he finally agreed to come along, it was clear from the look on his face that he was dreading every second. His wife's question must have haunted him. Since when do HOA inspections mean breaking into someone's home? As they drove toward my cabin that morning, Vicky was practically buzzing with anticipation. She built this moment up in her mind for weeks, convinced it would end with me humiliated and forced to obey. She'd been building up to this moment for months, convinced she was about to crush me once and for all. Clipboard in hand, camera ready, measuring tools packed and, most importantly, an unshakable belief that she was the hero here. "Time to show this community who really keeps them safe," she announced as they pulled up to my cabin. Dennis clutched the so-called emergency access kit, fully aware it was really a bunch of lockpicking tools. Inside, he was panicking. "This is breaking and entering," he thought, "but I'm too afraid to say number." The poor guy had no idea he was about to become the star witness in what would go down as one of the most satisfying legal victories over an HOA bully. What neither of them realized was that I was already watching them through my security cameras, calm as could be. I'd spent 6 months preparing for this exact moment. Every detail accounted for, every move anticipated. And in less than an hour, I had a live video call scheduled with the state's top legal authority. The real question wasn't whether they'd catch me, it was whether they'd realize whose trap they were actually walking into. 9:15 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday morning. The lake lay still, cloaked in morning mist. Everything looked serene and ordinary. I sat at my laptop, security feeds on one screen, recording devices running, quietly observing Vicky and Dennis as they got out of the car. Vicky looked like a general stepping onto a battlefield, adjusting her blazer, tightening her grip on the clipboard as if it were a badge of power. "Remember, Dennis," she said, her voice just loud enough for my external mix to catch, "we're protecting this community." Blake gave up his right to privacy when he ignored multiple official notices. The way she emphasized official, as if she spoke for some federal agency, would have been hilarious if it weren't so alarming. Then came the knocking, exactly as I'd predicted. First knock, professional, sharp, confident. I watched her posture through the window, a chin lifted, clipboard held like a shield. Second knock, louder, tinged with impatience. I stayed put, appearing lost in whatever was on my laptop. Third knock, full-on pounding, loud enough to wake the neighborhood. "Blake Morrison," she shouted, her voice dripping with manufactured authority. "Open this door immediately. This is official HOA business." Behind her, Dennis looked like he wished he could melt into the porch. I could see him checking his watch, shifting nervously. "Vicky," he said quietly, "maybe we should call the police if it's really an emergency, a broken bar," but she cut him off immediately. "We are the authority here, Dennis. Blake is counting on us." Backing down, not happening. Then came her fatal decision. "Dennis, this is obstruction of an emergency safety inspection. Get the access tools." Through my cameras, I watched Dennis's hands tremble as he reached for the lockpicks. He knew exactly what this meant and exactly how wrong it was, but fear of Vicky kept him moving. The sound of the lock being picked was crisp and unmistakable on my audio feed, a metallic click that sliced through the morning calm. At that moment, they crossed the line from harassment into felony breaking and entering. Dennis turned ghostly pale. Vicky, by contrast, looked almost giddy. She pushed open the door, stepping into my living room like she owned it. "Blake Morrison," she announced dramatically, "this is an official HOA emergency inspection. Present yourself immediately." Clipboard held high, chin raised as she really thought she was making history. Dennis followed, camera rolling, looking like he was headed to his own trial. I turned to face them slowly, exactly as planned. "Ms. Henderson," I said calmly, "what an unexpected visit." The look on her face was priceless. Instead of panic or anger, I gave her mild curiosity and steady calm. That should have been her first clue something was off. "Don't pretend this is a surprise," she snapped. "You got multiple official notices. This emergency inspection is mandatory, and you will comply." The venom in her tone made it clear. This wasn't about safety or the community, it was personal. She wanted to break me, to prove she had more power than anyone else. "I see," I replied evenly. "And the emergency ISA broken bar?" She rattled off her list like a rehearsed script. "Multiple code violations, obstruction of HOA authority, and potential safety hazards requiring immediate assessment." "I'm actually in the middle of something important," I said, motioning toward my laptop. "Perhaps we could schedule this properly." Any reasonable person might have paused then. Vicky wasn't reasonable. "I don't care what you're doing," she barked. "HOA business comes first." Then she made her biggest mistake. Curious about what was so important on my screen, she stepped closer. Dennis followed, still recording, probably questioning how his quiet Tuesday had turned into a criminal act. As Vicky leaned in, something on my laptop screen caught her eye, an official-looking seal, something clearly government-issued. Her confidence flickered just for a second. "Ms. Henderson," I warned softly, "I really think you should step back." But she couldn't help herself. "I don't care what you're doing," she snapped again, voice rising. "Ho, business comes before everything." Her curiosity got the better of her. She had to see what was on my screen, needed to prove that nothing and not even my work could matter more than her authority. That obsession, that compulsion to control every situation, was about to completely ruin her life. "What is that on your screen?" she demanded, stepping closer until she could make out the government seal. And then came one of the most satisfying moments I've ever witnessed. Her expression shifted from rock-solid confidence to flickering uncertainty, and finally to pure, dawning horror. It's the look you see when someone who thinks they're untouchable suddenly realizes they've wandered into territory way above their pay grade. Comment below. Have you ever seen someone go too far and instantly regret it? Those next few seconds stretched on forever. Vicky just stared at my screen, trying to process what she was seeing. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head, trying to reconcile this official seal with the narrative she built around me being nothing but a stubborn homeowner. Meanwhile, I was sitting there thinking, "You have no idea what's about to hit you." "Perhaps we should take this outside," I offered, still perfectly calm, which only seemed to enrage her further. "I'm sure the rest of the community would be interested in your inspection methods." But Vicky wasn't letting go. "I'm not leaving until I finish this mandatory inspection," she snapped, inching closer to the laptop to get a better look. What made it even better, they'd arrived at 9:15 instead of the 9 o'clock she had so confidently announced. I adjusted my plan on the fly, starting the meeting 15 minutes late actually played in my favor. Now it looked even more like they'd barged in unannounced, catching me mid-conference instead of catching me waiting for them. "Running a bit behind schedule," I murmured, checking my watch with a perfectly measured hint of surprise. Dennis, meanwhile, was starting to really see what was happening. His eyes darted to the multiple security cameras around the room, the professional lighting that was too deliberate to be casual, and the way my laptop was angled to capture everything. It must have hit him. This wasn't accidental. Blake planned for us to walk into this. Blake seems weirdly prepared for this, Dennis whispered to Vicky, the first real crack in his resolve. But she didn't hear him. She was locked in, still obsessed with asserting her power. "Ms. Henderson," I said gently, letting a note of warning slip into my voice, "you seem very interested in my work. You should know government contracts can be highly sensitive to unauthorized access." I watched the words hit her. Government contracts. For a brief moment, her confidence faltered, her brain scrambling to fit this new information into her narrative of me as an entitled homeowner ignoring HO rules. But Vicky's self-belief was ironclad. "I don't care what you do," she shot back. "HO emergency authority overrides personal business." She genuinely believed her imaginary emergency powers trumped federal business. The audacity was almost impressive. Dennis, meanwhile, looked stricken, remembering the night he'd spent scouring the HO bylaws for any mention of this emergency authority, a broken bar, and found absolutely nothing. And then, it happened. A voice, calm and professional, came through my laptop speakers, still faint but unmistakable. "Mr. Morrison, are you ready to begin our cybersecurity review?" Instantly, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. This wasn't a casual call. This was clearly someone official, someone who didn't expect to be interrupted. Vicky froze mid-step. Dennis's camera bag slipped from his shoulder, landing on the floor with a soft thud that echoed in the sudden silence. And me, inside, I was smiling. Here it is. The moment everything turns. The voice continued, a bit louder now, edged with polite concern. "Mr. Morrison, I'm noticing some movement in your background. Is everything all right?" The government seal on my screen now clear as day, bold letters spelling out State Attorney General's office. It might as well have been burning in neon for the effect it had on Vicky. Her face went through the full transformation. Confusion. Why would Blake be talking to someone that important? Recognition. Wait. That really is the Attorney General's seal. Absolute panic. Oh God, what have I done? Dennis stood there, stunned, probably replaying every single decision that led him to this nightmare. His wife's voice must have been echoing in his mind, since when do HOA inspections mean breaking into people's houses? Breaking into someone's house was bad enough, but doing it while they were in a live meeting with the Attorney General? That's the kind of mistake you can never undo. I slowly turned to face them both, and yes, I enjoyed it more than I probably should have. The trap had sprung, and I had the perfect view. How do you even begin to explain breaking into someone's home when the highest legal authority in the state is literally watching it happen live? Comment below, what's the worst timing you've ever seen? The silence was deafening. Vicky and Dennis were frozen, staring at the screen where Attorney General Williams waited, perfectly calm. I could practically see their thoughts racing. How did a routine inspection turn into felonies? Finally, in that calm, level voice that probably terrifies criminals everywhere, Attorney General Williams asked, "Mr. Morrison, who are these individuals in your home, and how did they gain access?" And me? I'd worked with government officials before. I knew exactly what came next. I dealt with government officials plenty of times through my cybersecurity consulting work, so I knew exactly what to do. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and let the evidence speak for itself. Attorney General Williams, I began steadily, I sincerely apologize for this interruption. These are uninvited guests who have just conducted an unauthorized entry into my property. I chose every word with care. Uninvited, unauthorized entry, legal language that made everything crystal clear without me ever needing to shout or accuse. I see, the Attorney General replied evenly. And do these individuals have any legal authority for a broken bar inspection? The pause before inspection, delivered with that faint trace of professional skepticism, was absolutely perfect. Vicky stood there frozen, mouth slightly open, unable to speak. That's an excellent question, ma'am, I said, turning to look directly at her. Ms. Henderson, would you like to explain to Attorney General Williams exactly under which legal statute you forced entry into my home? I could have softened Ida, but after months of her harassment, watching her squirm felt justified. Her mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. For so long, she'd been so certain she had authority that she'd never bothered to check if that authority actually existed. Now, standing before the state's highest legal officer, she was discovering that because I'm the HOA president wouldn't cut it. For the record, Attorney General Williams, I continued, this individual is the president of my homeowners association. She has broken into my home and, for months, has threatened me with a series of frivolous violations. Every word was being recorded, documented, and now witnessed by someone whose job was to prosecute precisely this kind of abuse. Then the Attorney General spoke the words that ended any illusion Vicky had left. Mr. Morrison, given what I'm witnessing, I should document this conversation, as it may be relevant to legal proceedings. The weight of that statement slammed into the room like a wrecking ball. This wasn't an awkward neighbor dispute anymore. This was a potential criminal case forming in real time. Yes, ma'am, I replied. I have comprehensive security footage available if it's needed as evidence. Vicky's eyes went wide. Only now did it dawn on her that every single move, every threat, every illegal act had been caught on high-definition video and audio. Please ensure all footage is preserved, the Attorney General instructed calmly. Government officials have obligations when we witness crimes in progress. That word crimes, plural, hung heavy in the silence. Vicky's face turned ashen. She'd started this thinking she was enforcing HOA rules and was now realizing she'd become the prime example of criminal misconduct. In a sudden burst of panic, she finally found her voice. This is a broken bar. This is entrapment. You planned this. You can't record this. She lunged for my laptop as if she could erase what had just happened. I calmly pulled it out of her reach. Ms. Henderson, you're now attempting to interfere with government business while a state official is present, I said evenly. She had just escalated her crime from trespassing to obstruction of justice. Ma'am, Attorney General Williams said, her voice suddenly sharp, I strongly advise you to step away from that equipment immediately. When the state's top prosecutor tells you to stop, you stop. But Vicky was too far gone, her brain too clouded by panic to listen. Dennis, meanwhile, had gone completely pale. He set his inspection tools on the floor like they were radioactive. "Oh God," he kept whispering, hands shaking. "What have we done? What have we done?" At last, reality was sinking in for him. Breaking into someone's house was bad enough. Doing it during a live meeting with the Attorney General? That's the kind of decision that never stops haunting you. The truly perfect part? Everything I'd done had been legal. I had arranged a legitimate business meeting in my own home. They had forced their way in, uninvited, and the state's top lawyer just happened to witness the whole thing. That's not entrapment. That's fatal and a bit of foresight. Attorney General Williams, I continued, I have live security feeds that captured the entire break-in, plus months of escalating threats and harassment from Miss Henderson. I scheduled our meeting specifically because I expected an escalation like this and wanted a proper legal witness. The Attorney General nodded gravely. "Mr. Morrison, this appears to be a clear case of criminal trespass, harassment, and now interference with state business. This entire session has been recorded by our systems and will be forwarded to the relevant local authorities. Given the circumstances, this may also require coordination with higher agencies." Vicky made one last desperate attempt to rewrite reality. "This is fake. He set this up. That isn't really the Attorney General." "Ms. Henderson," I replied calmly, "the Attorney General's office phone number is public. You're welcome to call and verify." "Ma'am," Attorney General Williams added, "I can provide official identification to confirm my identity if you wish." Even offered proof. Vicky was too deep in denial to accept it. "Mr. Morrison," the Attorney General concluded, "I believe we should reschedule our cybersecurity consultation. Clearly, you have more immediate legal matters to address. My office will coordinate fully with local law enforcement. Please ensure all footage is preserved, as it constitutes evidence of multiple criminal acts." And just like that, the call ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Vicky stood there, hollow-eyed, watching her entire world collapse. Dennis sat hunched over, head in his hands, calculating the ruinous moment would bring to his life. And me? I just sat there, quietly taking it all in and knowing justice had finally, spectacularly, caught up with them. Phone in hand, I prepared to make the call that would end Victoria Henderson's reign of terror for good. 911, I said calmly, locking eyes with Vicky as I spoke. "I need to report a break-in. A witness lived by the state Attorney General." But Vicky's nightmare had only just begun. 8 minutes later, the police arrived. Funny thing about telling dispatch that the state Attorney General personally witnessed a crime, it gets you priority response. 2 officers walked in expecting some elaborate federal sting operation and instead found the most thoroughly documented case of breaking and entering they'd likely ever seen. I had it all ready. Security footage of the break-in, months of Vicky's threatening emails and letters, the recorded call with Attorney General Williams, a detailed timeline of escalating harassment. It must have felt like I'd handed them a fully wrapped conviction. The officers exchanged glances, as if silently saying, "This is going to be the easiest report we'll file all month." Vicky, still clinging to denial, tried playing the victim. "It's all fabricated." She kept insisting, he manipulated everything. That wasn't really the Attorney General. The desperation in her voice bordered on pitiful. She was so locked into her fantasy she couldn't see reality even as it towered over her. The officers weren't buying it for a second. They verified Attorney General Williams' identity through official channels, confirmed our meeting had been legitimate government business, and then watched Vicky and Dennis force entry on my security footage. Dennis, pale and shaken, immediately offered to give a statement about how Vicky had coerced him. His voice trembled, but he clearly understood this was his only way out. Watching them arrest Vicky in my own living room was surreal. They read her Miranda rights while half the neighborhood watched from their windows. Breaking and entering, criminal trespass, harassment, obstruction of government. Buzziness of the list of charges just kept growing. Dennis avoided arrest only because he agreed on the spot to testify about everything Vicky had pressured him to do. But Vicky wasn't done. Even from jail, she mounted a counterattack that nearly worked. Through her family and friends, she launched a sophisticated smear campaign on social media. Blake Morrison is a corrupt contractor gaming the system. The Attorney General call was fake. He's running an illegal business from his cabin. It was a masterclass in disinformation. The lies spread faster than I expected. Threatening anonymous emails landed in my inbox. Neighbors who used to wave suddenly wouldn't make eye contact. Local media picked up her version without fact-checking. For the first time, I was truly worried. If enough people believed her, it could destroy my reputation and my business. In cybersecurity, trust is everything, and her lies targeted that directly. Some clients started asking uneasy questions, and for a moment, I wondered if this fight had really been worth it. Maybe it would have been easier to move again, disappear quietly, and let it go. Worst of all was watching what her poison did to our neighborhood. Decades-old friendships cracked overnight. People picked sides based on rumors and half-truths. Even from behind bars, Vicky was still dividing us. Then, Dennis did something I never saw coming. Vicky had been calling him from jail, pushing him to support her story. "If you don't back me up," she threatened, "I'll tell everyone you were part of this setup." She tried to turn his fear against him again, just like she always had. But Dennis had finally had enough. His wife had been telling him for months, "Do the right thing. Don't let fear make you a liar." This time, he listened to her. Meanwhile, I decided to fight back with facts, not anger. I organized a public community meeting, inviting every resident. I prepared a detailed evidence display, security footage, a timeline of harassment, official letters from the Attorney General, character references from business associates. "I'm here to present facts," I told the packed room. "Judge for yourselves." You could feel the tension. Vicky's loyalists clustered on one side, skeptics on the other, and plenty of people stuck in the middle, just wishing the drama would end. Halfway through my presentation, Dennis stood up from the back. The entire room went silent. Everyone knew he'd been there the day this all came crashing down. Everyone in the room knew Dennis was the key witness, and everyone was silently asking the same question: whose side was he going to take? Dennis's voice trembled, but there was resolve in his eyes. "I need to stop this and tell the truth about what really happened that morning," he began. You could have heard a pin drop. Then he said the words that changed everything. "What Blake doesn't know is that this wasn't Vicky's first victim." Gasps echoed through the room. "She's been forcing me to create fake violation reports for months. Blake isn't her first target, and I have proof." Vicky's carefully constructed story didn't just fall apart, it detonated. All her claims about defending the neighborhood, enforcing rules, and acting in the community's best interest vanished in an instant. Dennis had exposed it as a campaign built on systematic fraud and intimidation. Dennis walked to the front, his hands visibly shaking as he opened a small, dog-eared notebook. "I started keeping records after the third fake violation Vicky made me write," he explained, his voice steadying. "I knew it was wrong, so I documented everything to protect myself. When she crossed the line into committing a federal crime, I couldn't stay silent anymore." What he read next stunned everyone. Mrs. Cooper, cited because her mailbox was allegedly 2 inches too far to the left and no actual measurement ever taken. Mr. Rodriguez, accused of grass too green, suggesting overwatering entirely made up because Vicky personally disliked him. The Johnson family, threatened with fines for excessive bird feeding, simply because Vicky didn't like seeing birds in their yard. The room reacted instantly. Some people's faces showed dawning realization that they finally understood they'd been living under a regime of arbitrary harassment. Others still looked skeptical, quietly wondering if Dennis and I had somehow staged this confession, and many just looked worn out, desperate for the conflict to end. Then something unexpected happened. Residents began producing their own evidence. Someone pulled out photos of so-called violations that looked completely normal. Others shared recordings of Vicky's threatening voicemails and emails. The pattern became undeniable. This wasn't about neighborhood standards, it was about control. Mrs. Cooper stood up, her voice shaking with frustration. "I spent $300 to move my mailbox 6 inches because I was afraid of what she'd do if I didn't." Piece by piece, a picture emerged of a year-long reign of intimidation. Vicky hadn't only targeted me, she terrorized anyone who failed to show her the obedience she demanded. The fake violations, the threats, the selective rule enforcement, it had all been part of her strategy to feel powerful. Even from jail, Vicky tried one last move to save herself. She claimed Dennis was lying to protect me, that we'd orchestrated this whole thing to frame her. But Dennis had come prepared. He played recordings of Vicky's call, so her voice filling the room, unmistakable and chilling. "If you don't write that violation, I'll make sure you're removed from the board. Remember, Dennis, I know where you get your pension information." Blake thinks he's clever. "We'll show the community who really protects them." After that, even her staunchest defenders fell silent. The mask was gone. People finally saw who Victoria Henderson truly was, and not a guardian of community standards, but a bully who'd manipulated her position to punish anyone who crossed her. That's when a prosecutor stepped forward and asked it. The prosecutor asked the question that led to my final revelation. "Mr. Morrison, was the timing of this incident purely coincidental?" I took a deep breath. It was time to be completely honest. "No, Your Honor," I said. "I planned this." The courtroom went utterly silent. I knew, based on her history with other residents, that Vicky would try to break in eventually. So I scheduled my meeting with the state attorney general for that exact time, because I wanted the best possible witness to see what she'd do. I didn't just defend myself, I let her reveal her true nature to everyone. The reaction was mixed. Some people admired the strategy, the way I'd used Vicky's own aggression to expose her. Others looked uneasy at how carefully I'd planned it, questioning whether it was ethical, even if it was completely legal. But no one could deny that it worked. The legal consequences for Vicky were severe. Multiple charges including breaking and entering, harassment, and interference with government business. The community voted unanimously to remove her from the HOA and ban her permanently. Even her staunchest former supporters couldn't justify what she'd done once they saw the full scope of her abuse. But for me, the real vindication wasn't just legal, it was personal. I went from being painted as a corrupt contractor to being recognized as the person who finally stood up to a tyrant. Residents I barely knew came forward to thank me, not just for exposing Vicky, but for giving them the courage to speak about what they'd endured too. The reform that followed was more than I dared hope for. The community elected entirely new leadership, committed to openness and accountability. Despite his involvement in the break-in, Dennis was elected treasurer because people respected the courage it took for him to tell the truth. New policies were put in place for inspections, rule enforcement, and communication, designed specifically to prevent another power-hungry bully from rising to power. My reputation didn't just recover, it grew stronger than ever. People now saw me not only as someone who defended myself, but as someone who stood up for everyone. The case became an example other communities referenced when tackling HOA abuse, and I started getting calls from attorneys across the state asking for advice on handling similar situations. But honestly, the real victory was simpler. I could finally enjoy my lake cabin in peace. No more threatening letters, no more surprise inspections, no more living under the shadow of someone else's petty vendetta. Justice had finally been served, and it felt incredible. After the sentencing, a reporter asked me what advice I'd give others facing HOA bullies. "Sometimes," I said, "you don't fight them head-on, you create the conditions where they destroy themselves." As I walked away from the courthouse, I thought the story was over. But then my phone rang, a call that would change everything again. What happens when justice becomes more than an outcome, but a calling? Tell us in the comments about a time you saw karma catch up with someone who truly deserved it. A month later, life was everything I'd hoped for when I first bought that cabin. Peaceful mornings by the lake, professional respect, and a community finally united by honesty instead of fear. My cybersecurity project with the state had wrapped up successfully, bringing in new contracts and a reputation as someone who could handle sensitive situations with both intelligence and discretion. Meanwhile, the transformation in our neighborhood was inspiring to watch. Dennis stepped into his new role with unexpected confidence, using his background as a teacher to help residents truly understand their rights and responsibilities. The new HOA board ran things transparently. Meetings were open to everyone, every decision documented, and every message respectful and professional. For the first time in years, we were finally dealing with actual community concerns instead of made-up violations. Watching Vicky's fall from power was surreal even for someone who'd experienced her worst. She ended up with 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, $15,000 in fines and restitution, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board. She was handed a statewide ban from holding any HOA leadership position ever again. The court also ordered her to attend anger management classes, though honestly, I doubted those could fix problems as deep-rooted as hers. But her personal downfall turned out to be far worse than the legal punishment. Vicky lost her house to mounting legal fees and fines. Last I heard, she was working the returns counter at a local department store, living in a small apartment on the other side of town. The same woman who once terrorized an entire community with her authority was now quietly asking customers if they wanted to buy the extended warranty. Every now and then, I'd see her car creeping past our lake community, and I wondered what went through her mind as she saw what we'd built without her. Real harmony, neighbors actually helping each other with yard work, organizing BBQs, and enjoying each other's company. Everything in HOA should have been from the start, and everything it never could be under her rule. The ripple effects went far beyond our neighborhood. My case started being taught in HOA law courses statewide, becoming a textbook example of where unchecked authority can lead and how to stop it. Law schools used it to teach evidence gathering, due process, and the limits of power. It even went viral online, inspiring countless other victims to come forward, this time backed by real legal support. I started getting consultation requests from people all over the country dealing with similar HOA tyrants. Attorneys working HOA abuse cases reached out, asking for advice on strategy and evidence. What began as me just defending my piece turned into something bigger, a movement for reform. And along the way, I discovered something about myself. I'd gone into this only wanting to be left alone, but when backed into a corner, I didn't respond with rage. I got strategic. Faced with a bully, I didn't escalate emotionally. I built a situation where they defeated themselves. One of the most satisfying parts was watching Dennis's redemption arc. Despite his initial role in the break-in, the community ultimately respected his courage to speak out when it mattered most. His wife was proud again. His adult children stopped worrying about what he'd gotten himself into. And Dennis himself found new purpose in protecting others from the abuse he once helped enable. The new HOA rules we put in place became a model for other communities. Clear guidelines for what truly counts as a violation, a fair appeals process for residents, communication standards rooted in respect and transparency, nothing complicated, just common sense. But it changed everything. My professional life took an unexpected turn too. The state attorney general's office was so impressed by how I handled things that they recommended me for additional cybersecurity projects with other government agencies. Turns out someone who could set a perfect legal trap under pressure was exactly the kind of person they wanted safeguarding sensitive systems. But truthfully, the simple pleasures meant the most. Sitting on the porch with my laptop, the lake calm in front of me, watching sunsets instead of checking security cameras. No more arbitrary violation letters, no more living under someone else's petty tyranny. Our community BBQs felt different now. Instead of avoiding each other out of fear, people laughed, shared stories, and helped one another. Kids could run around without parents worrying about noise complaints. It was like watching a neighborhood heal after a long illness. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw your HOA story online. We're in Florida, dealing with a president who banned parking in our own driveways. Any advice? I read the message and couldn't help but smile. One victory against injustice often sparks another. I know someone who might help. I typed back, let me make some calls. Because justice isn't just about winning your own battle, it's about showing others they can win theirs, too. And apparently, what started as my fight with Victoria Henderson was only the beginning. Some battles end, but others are just getting started. As I looked out over that peaceful lake, I realized I'd somehow become a magnet for HOA horror stories across the country. And my next call? The Florida driveway Warsaw case, so bizarre it made Vicky's harassment look tame. If this story inspired you to push back against unfair treatment, smash that like button. This is J.A. Storiessa, and next time, we're diving into the Florida driveway wars. Trust me, you won't believe what happened there. Thanks for watching Ya Storiessa, where common sense takes a vacation, and karma runs the show. Like, comment, and subscribe for your weekly dose of mayhem.